All right, so we are recording. Thank you very much. So in
Joseph's
rec
coming. Joseph's coming.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. That's great. Thanks,
Oh,
Barjinder.
he's on
Just a
Wollongong. He must be
second.
on Wollongong time, is he? Oh, really?
I don't know.
Ah.
He'll be there in a sec. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we'll bear with him then.
Geez, you get the hierarchy though. I called him. You didn't answer my call.
Oh, well, I've been harassing him all morning, so he probably thought it was for something more important. Just kidding.
How could there be anything more important?
I think he's got you blocked.
Just
joking.
He's ghosting
It's
the rest
very
of us.
possible. Here we go. This is how you learn these
That's
things.
what it is.
Yeah, has he joined yet? Not yet. I'm sorry. I'm just waiting on the other. Yeah. Sorry about this, Clive.
No, all
building up,
good, mate.
We're building up suspense.
Yeah, doing that, that's for sure.
Yes, Joseph's on board. Hello, Joseph.
Hello. Sorry about that.
Thank you very
Good.
much.
Thanks for
So
joining.
we will continue now. So in recognising Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's spiritual and cultural connection to country and in continuing ACU's commitment to reconciliation, we would like to acknowledge the First Peoples and traditional owners and custodians of the country where ACU campuses are located. We respectfully acknowledge our elders, past and present, and thank them for their guidance as we walk in their footsteps. So welcome everybody and thank you for your time. Today we have the confirmation of candidature milestone review presentation of Clive Haydon. And on today's milestone panel, that's a current, it's the mid-candidature review. Sorry, I've written the wrong one. So with the mid-candidature review panel, we have the chair, Associate Professor Teresa Dickey. The expert panel is Professor John Marshall Reef and Professor Joseph Ciarocci. Supervisors are Principal Supervisor Dr. Emma Bradshaw, Professor Rich Ryan, Associate Professor Jesse Gow, and all the way from the USA, we like to welcome Emily Stanford Schultz, and thank you for her time. It's been late evening there in the US. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Clive, who will share his screen and present. I'd ask everybody else to please put themselves on mute. Thanks, Clive, all yours.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to report on the progression of my thesis project, Ancestor Connectedness and Eudaimonic Wellbeing. Do distal family connections help us to belong and become? As indicated previously in my thesis project proposal, there's some evidence that participating in the family-related activity of ancestor story exploration may be linked with basic psychological needs satisfaction and well-being, including indicators of eudaimonic well-being. Thus, the underlying objective of my thesis project is to investigate and test the premise that ancestor stories will be linked to indicators of eudaimonic well-being. As previously proposed, I'm testing this proposition through conducting 3 interrelated studies. Study 1 consists of a systematic review of the literature and a meta-analytic assessment of the link between proximal, that is parents, siblings and grandparents, family basic psychological needs support and thwarting, and eudaimonic well-being. To date, the systematic review has been completed and the meta-analysis is currently in process. Through a validation of a new measure of non-reciprocal family belonging I developed as part of the study, Study 2 investigated the proposition that distal, non-reciprocal family relationships with ancestors are linked with basic need satisfaction and other indicators of optimal functioning. Building on Study 1's insights about the link between proximal family relationships and eudaimonic well-being, and the results of Study 2 that suggested that there's an association between distal family relationships such as ancestor connectedness and eudaimonic well-being, and that there may be some value in promoting actions that bolster non-reciprocal family belonging, and that's particularly among late adolescents and young adults. Study 3 will consider whether young adults who participate in ancestor connectedness activities, such as exploring ancestor stories, experience increases in their eudaimonic well-being. The evaluation of participant outcomes will consist of measuring their non-reciprocal family belonging using the measure validated in study 2, and as well as measuring their basic psychological needs satisfaction and indicators of eudaimonic well-being. The 3 studies combined should provide evidence to support the overall project premise that exploring ancestor stories will be linked to indicators of eudaimonic well-being. It's generally acknowledged that the family has an important and lasting influence on family members, particularly on children and adolescents. And as such, within self-determination theory, the family is deemed to be a factor in the support or thwarting of basic psychological needs of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And as the satisfaction of basic psychological needs is associated with eudaimonic well-being, the family is also likely to be an influence on the levels of eudaimonic well-being experienced by family members. As such, as a first step to understanding more distal family relationships, I'm seeking to first to understand how proximal family members such as parents, siblings, and grandparents influence the development of eudaimonic well-being. Also, it appears that less is known about family relationships and eudaimonic well-being, that is, more durable and stable forms of well-being, than there is about family relationships and subjective well-being, which is here and now feelings of happiness. For example, Emma Bradshaw and others noted that in their recent meta-analysis that they only considered autonomy, supportive parenting, and subjective well-being. In doing so, they pointed to the gap in the literature regarding family basic psychological needs support more broadly and its influence on eudaimonic well-being. Thus, the purpose of Study 1, the systematic review and meta-analysis, is to provide further understanding about the link between proximal family relationships and eudaimonic well-being, with a specific focus on all 3 psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Eudaimonic well-being is an important element of healthy development. Such well-being or optimal functioning describes the processes and associated outcomes of pursuing one's highest potential. It includes identifying, striving to harness, and expressing the best within oneself. This eudaimonic way of living results in the eudaimonic outcomes of meaning and growth of the self. From a self-determination theory perspective, identifying, striving to harness, and expressing the best within oneself is manifested in a variety of ways. I've selected 3 of these as key indicators of eudaimonic well-being. The first is autonomously motivated and integrated identity development. Within self-determination theory, identity development that is associated with pursuing one's highest potential involves making autonomous choices about life values, goals, and roles. Such choices also need to be internalized and integrated so that they support basic psychological needs support and support for the self's natural tendency for growth, integration, and organization. When identity-related choices are autonomous, valued, and self-endorsed, identity development becomes a form of eudaimonic living. Such living has been associated with personal growth, engaged living, and self-actualization. As indicated, pursuing one's highest potential includes the pursuit of personal goals. The content and focus of such goals and aspirations are important to eudaimonic living. From a self-determination theory perspective, in order to promote growth and eudaimonic living, the content of goals and goal achievement must support the basic psychological needs of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Research indicates that pursuing and achieving intrinsic aspirations, those goals oriented towards personal development, personal relationships, community contribution, and physical health, promote need satisfaction and support well-being. Such intrinsic aspirations can be considered indicators of eudaimonic living. Meaning in life has also been identified as an indicator of eudaimonic well-being. A person who enjoys meaning has a sense that their life is significant, that it has direction, and that they're contributing long-term influence to a valued cause greater than themselves. Meaning can also include an understanding of self and one's place in the world and their reason for being. As with other forms of eudaimonic living, from a self-determination theory perspective, meaning will be achieved to the degree that one's choices for seeking and finding meaning satisfy basic psychological needs. Thus, one who is pursuing their highest potential, that is, living eudaimonically, through avenues such as autonomously motivated and intrinsic goals, is also likely to be creating and experiencing meaning in their lives. As has been suggested, support for basic need satisfaction is of great importance when considering factors that influence eudaimonic well-being. And this is especially so within the family environment. Varying experiences of love, care, expectations, interactions, and belonging act together to either support or thwart an individual's basic psychological needs satisfaction and eudaimonic living. The evidence base suggests that the family context may support or thwart basic psychological needs in multiple ways, including via parenting orientations as defined within self-determination theory, psychological control, and related non-self-determination theory forms of parenting such as parenting styles, parenting and family behaviours, and parent-child attachment. Based on self-determination theory's propositions that one, basic psychological needs support is associated with eudaimonic well-being, and two, that proximal social contexts such as the family can either support or thwart basic psychological needs, I'm in the process of meta-analytically testing the following general hypotheses. One, there will be a positive correlation between basic psychological support in the family and eudaimonic well-being, and two, there will be a negative correlation between basic psychological need thwarting family environments and eudaimonic well-being. The first step in the systematic review and meta-analysis was to conduct a database search for relevant studies. This search resulted in 7,535 studies. These studies were then subjected to title and abstract screening. Following this process, the remaining 532 studies were subjected to full text screening, resulting in 33 eligible studies spanning 27 years. From these 33 studies, 142 effect sizes have been extracted. The total number of participants across the studies was 31,919, with North America contributing 16 studies, Europe 10, Asia, Africa 9, for a total of 35 countries represented. Studies were predominantly cross-sectional, with less than a quarter being longitudinal studies. For the meta-analysis portion, I'll analyse the extracted data using R, and I'll perform univariate meta-analysis. In other words, the link between X and Y, moderation analysis, for example, by gender, age, and type of eudaimonic well-being, among others, risk of bias analysis, and an analysis of publication bias. Although the meta-analysis is still in progress, some initial observations can be made. First, both family need support and family need thwarting studies are well represented. Second, and almost exclusively, correlations between family need support and eudaimonic well-being were positive, although not always statistically significant. And similarly, generally correlations between family needs thwarting and eudaimonic well-being were negative, although not always statistically significant. Third, all of the basic psychological needs, autonomy, competence, and relatedness were represented, although only a small number of studies considered competence. Similarly, all the key indicators of eudaimonic living and well-being, identity integration, intrinsic aspirations, and meaning in life were represented. And finally, within the selected study, there was a wide range of measures that have been used to measure family needs, support and thwarting and eudaimonic well-being. The meta-analysis currently being conducted and just discussed is expected to show that family basic psychological needs support links positively with eudaimonic well-being. However, the focus of that study is on proximal family relationships. There's also evidence that distal forms of family connection, such as a sense of connectedness with more distal ancestors, may relate positively to basic psychological needs satisfaction, optimal functioning, and well-being. Given that both proximal and distal sources of family connectedness are thought to be good, I suspected that if people felt connected to their ancestors, they would report more optimal functioning, for example, identity integration, intrinsic goal aspirations, and meaning in life. However, no measure of ancestor connectedness existed with which this possibility could be tested. And so in study 2, I adapted other measures of belonging to develop and validate a measure to assess people's ancestor connectedness, or non-reciprocal family belonging, and then tested its associations with indices of optimal functioning. Using the newly developed and validated measure of non-reciprocal family belonging, I expected to find that non-reciprocal family belonging relates positively to indices of optimal functioning, that non-reciprocal family belonging relates negatively to indices of suboptimal functioning, and that non-reciprocal family belonging would predict unique variation in the optimal functioning outcomes over and above related measures of belonging. For the validation study, a sample of 971 American adults was recruited by professional survey panel company Qualtrics to complete the non-reciprocal family belonging self-report items and a selection of related measures. The mean age of the sample was 50 years old. The sample was evenly divided between female and male participants, and the vast majority of participants were born in the United States. Items for the new measure were selected and adapted to represent three key themes of connection with ancestors that I was interested in measuring: interest in ancestors, sense of connection to ancestors, and the personal meaning value of connection to ancestors. 4 items were selected from the ethnic identity construct of affirmation and belonging. Affirmation and belonging is defined as a sense of group membership and attitudes towards the individual's group. It consists of pride, attachment, and commitment to the group. 3 items were selected from the tribalism scale. Tribalism encompasses group identity, loyalty, shared culture, and a sense of belonging. Items from these measures were then adapted to create the non-reciprocal family belonging measure. Once selected, items were reworded so that they could be used as an indicator of one's feelings towards their family history and ancestors. I assessed non-reciprocal family belonging using an initial pool of 7 items. They were: I am interested in spending time trying to find out more about my ancestral family, such as its history, traditions, and customs. I have a clear sense of my family's history and what it means for me. I think a lot about my life in relation to what I know about the lives of my ancestors. I have a strong sense of belonging to my ancestral family. The history of my ancestral family's nationalities are important to me. I feel like I honour my ancestral family. When I notice my ancestors' weaknesses, I'm willing to extend compassion to them. For validity analysis, participants completed items on relevant measures of optimal and suboptimal functioning, as well as items from general belonging scales. To assess the association between variables, I conducted exploratory factor analysis. In the first step, a parallel analysis suggested that 1 and 2 factor solutions were defensible. Following on from the parallel analysis, and to better understand the association between the latent variables, I ran exploratory factor analysis to test the item factor loading for both possibilities the parallel analysis suggested. This analysis across both 1 and 2 factors indicated that item 7 was not as strong as the other factors. All other items had very good or excellent loadings for 1 factor, but for 2 factors, item 3 was split across the factors with low scores. Based on these exploratory results, I determined that 1 factor, with item 7 removed, was the best solution. To confirm this decision, I opted to use confirmatory factor analysis to compare the 1 factor solution to the confirmatory factor analysis of the 2 factor solution. For the confirmatory factor analysis, I ran a 1 factor 6 item model and a 3 item 2 factor model. Item factor loadings were excellent for both models, with all items loading above 0.93. Although the 2 factor model was the best fitting, meeting all fit criteria except the root mean squared error of approximation, the items across the 2 factors of this model were highly correlated, ranging from 0.93 to 1.26, indicating they were basically measuring the same thing. And given that the 1 factor model also showed a good fit, it was deemed that there was no meaningful reason to have 2 factors. Thus, the 1 factor 6 item model was selected as the non-reciprocal family belonging measure to be validated. This new measure also showed good internal consistency with a Cronbach's alpha of 0.88. Convergent validity was tested using correlations between the new measure and several measures of optimal functioning, ill-being, and belonging. In line with the hypotheses, non-reciprocal family belonging had a significant moderate positive correlation with all measures of optimal functioning. Also, as expected, correlations with all measures of suboptimal functioning were negative and statistically significant, albeit small. Also, in line with expectations, the non-reciprocal family belonging measure positively correlated with the need to belong and with general belongingness. These results suggested good convergent validity for the new measure. To test the independent predictive utility of non-reciprocal family belonging, I conducted simultaneous regressions with 6 of the 13 variables used for evaluating convergent validity. For each outcome, I ran 2 models. In the first model, the outcome variable was regressed on general belongingness. In the second model, non-reciprocal family belonging was added to the model. I then compared the 2 models using analysis of variance. For all 3 optimal functioning measures selected, basic psychological needs satisfaction, identity development, and meaning in life, adding non-reciprocal family belonging significantly improved the model. There was no significant change when adding non-reciprocal family belonging to the models predicting suboptimal functioning. These results suggest that although related to general belonging, non-reciprocal family belonging has statistically significant unique predictive power. As indicated, I expected to find that non-reciprocal family belonging, as measured on my validated scale, would link positively with measures of optimal functioning, negatively with suboptimal functioning, and predict independent variance in optimal outcomes when controlling for general belongingness. I found support for all these hypotheses. The strong correlation evidenced in the factor analysis between items 1 to 6 suggests that ancestor connectedness consists of interest in learning about ancestors and how they lived, a sense of belonging to ancestors, and reflecting and drawing meaning from ancestors. Knowing this is important for designing and facilitating activities that promote ancestor connectedness. These results suggest that to be of most value for promoting connectedness and optimal functioning, traditional family history research activities may be usefully combined with opportunities for personal connection, reflection, and meaning making. For example, as one listens to or reads ancestor stories, they could be invited to reflect on the impact of the story to them. They may consider questions such as, how did the choices of the ancestor in this story influence my life? Or in what ways am I similar to the ancestor in the story? Such questions may promote personal connection, leading to a sense of belonging, as well as insights that may lead to enhanced personal meaning, such as purpose, direction, and self-understanding. As indicated, connectedness to ancestors was moderately associated with all indicators of optimal functioning. Further, the strongest correlations were with those that could be classified as more durable and stable eudaimonic functioning, basic need satisfaction, autonomously motivated identity development, self-regulation, intrinsic aspirations, engaged living, and meaning in life. As explained earlier, whereas subjective well-being can be thought of as a more here and now or day-to-day indicator of well-being, how you are as a person, ancestor connectedness seems strongly tied to who you are. The distinction between eudaimonic and subjective well-being in relation to ancestor connectedness may be particularly important for supporting the positive development of late adolescents and young adults who are at a critical stage of seeking to discover who they are. This phase of development includes developing both a sense of belonging and identifying values, goals, and roles. Given that ancestor connectedness was linked with both need satisfaction and durable optimal identity experiences, it would seem important to provide opportunities for late adolescents and young adults to discover and explore ancestor information and stories that fosters their interest in and knowledge of ancestors, builds a sense of belonging, and is a catalyst for finding personal insights and meaning. The tests of discriminant validity suggested that non-reciprocal family belonging has unique predictive capacity beyond that of general belonging, particularly as just described in relation to indicators of optimal functioning. These results indicate that experiences of belonging and relatedness to those who are not present, such as ancestors, have unique characteristics differentiating them from general proximal experiences of belonging and relatedness. This may be important for those who experience low relatedness in proximal relationships. Research indicates that low proximal relatedness is linked with ill-being. Therefore, based on the results of this study, one strategy to foster an increased sense of belonging and well-being for those struggling in proximal relationships may be to assist them to increase their connectedness to ancestors. For example, youth who are experiencing low relatedness with their parents could be provided opportunities to discover and reflect on the stories of their ancestors. Previous research has found that such opportunities foster improved well-being by creating a sense of intergenerational belonging. In conclusion, the results from Study 2 provide initial support for the potential validity of the newly developed measure of non-reciprocal family belonging. Further, it appears that having a strong sense of ancestor connectedness, ancestor interest and knowledge, sense of belonging to ancestors, and deriving personal meaning from ancestors is associated with an enhanced sense of durable, optimal identity and experiences of optimal functioning. It seems that as we connect with ancestors, we feel that we belong, which in turn helps us to become our best selves. Given the results of Study 2 and the expected results of Study 1, that there will be a positive association between family basic psychological needs support and eudaimonic well-being, I'm interested to find out if taking specific actions intended to bolster ancestor connection, non-reciprocal family belonging, can increase a person's degree of eudaimonic well-being. Additionally, I'm particularly interested in testing this with young adults who are at a critical stage of identifying and trying to harness the best within themselves as they seek meaning and direction in life. As it happens, there are universities in the United States that incorporate ancestor connection activities into their curriculum, and this provides an opportunity for me to test the eudaimonic wellbeing outcomes of students who undertake these ancestor connection activities. As such, in Study 3, to be conducted in the second half of this year, the aim is to evaluate the optimal wellbeing outcomes for young adults aged 18 to 25 that participate in ancestor story discovery, exploration, and reflection activities. The study will consist of a minimum of 55 participants enrolled in subjects that include ancestor connection workshop components. Participants will complete non-reciprocal family belonging and wellbeing surveys just prior to participating in the workshop activities, just after the workshop activities, and 6 months after. A control group who are not enrolled in the subjects offering the Ancestor Connection activities will also complete pre and post surveys. Examples of Ancestor Connection activities participants will complete include gathering ancestor artefacts, interviewing a living ancestor, learning and telling ancestor stories, completing a creative piece that pays tribute to an ancestor. It is hypothesised that participation in Ancestor Connection activities will increase participants' sense of connection with ancestors, non-reciprocal family belonging, which will in turn be associated with an increase in autonomous identity development and integration, intrinsic aspirations, and meaning in life. In conclusion, eudaimonic well-being, that is autonomously motivated and integrated identity, intrinsic aspirations, and meaning in life, is a manifestation of optimal, durable, and stable well-being. The family is an important social context that likely influences the degree to which the development of eudaimonic well-being is supported or thwarted, and it is expected that Study 1 will provide additional support for this assertion. Study 2 provided support for the premise that an important element of familial influence on eudaimonic well-being is non-reciprocal family belonging or connectedness with ancestors. Additionally, it is expected that Study 3 will provide further support for the proposition that gathering and reflecting on ancestor stories will promote non-reciprocal family belonging and in turn eudaimonic well-being. Thus, the results to date and those that are expected support the assertion that the family, including distal ancestors, may be an important influence on basic psychological needs support and eudaimonic well-being. My PhD project timeline outlines all the remaining key tasks and deadlines of the project. Although each study will be completed at different times, tasks for each study will be worked on at the same time. For example, while still undertaking tasks for the Study 1 meta-analysis, I'll also be finalising the surveys for Study 3. The Ethics Committee application for Study 3 has been reviewed and I'm currently waiting feedback on requested revisions. The Study 1 meta-analysis is due to be completed and ready to be submitted to a journal on the 1st of March 2025. And Study 3 data collection is scheduled to commence during the last week of August this year. All other key dates for preparing and submitting my thesis no later than December 2025 are outlined in the timeline. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present the progress I've made to date on my thesis project. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so
very
much. Thanks, Clive. That was a very, very nice and clear presentation. I enjoyed hearing that. And before I open to the panel, I'd like to ask a question myself. It's more of a question out of curiosity. It's not so much feedback or a recommendation, but I realize that most of your sample will be coming from US participants in all 3 of your studies. But I am wondering if you would expect any cultural differences, theoretically, or have you come across any research that has looked at this, like just thinking of more westernized groups and less individual and more collective?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and not related to this study, but previously I've been involved with conducting ancestor connectedness activities with those from various cultures, in one group in particular, street kids in South Africa, and native African descent, and certainly they responded as well, if not better, to any other groups that I've been involved with. And I guess from a theoretical perspective, we'd expect that ancestor connectedness would be universal because we all have ancestors and family is important to all of us. And so obviously the values that are shared might be different. and the social context might be slightly different, but that general universal connection to family remains the same. That's been my experience anyway.
Okay. One thing that came to mind, and maybe this is not relevant, but there are cultures like my own where there's a collective, not like we don't really like our ancestors that much, I'd say. So, how's that factored in? Does that play a role at all? Or I saw that one of your items is about forgiveness with ancestors, etc. But nevertheless, for example, myself, and I am only speaking for myself, I'm not that interested in my ancestors, for many reasons.
Yeah, sure. So a couple of thoughts come to mind there. First of all is that the experience of reflecting on ancestor stories is about the individual looking at what they value from the stories or what they take from the stories. So as you, and I'm obviously just hypothesizing here what your experience may be, but let's just say for the sake of the argument, if one of the reasons you don't feel connected to your ancestors is because you feel that some of their behavior was negative or they acted in
Yes.
ways that you don't value, that experience still provides you with a context for reflecting on what's important to you. And so it can be a way of assisting you as you identify what's important to you. I don't value those behaviors, therefore I'm going to live differently. And that's still a lesson that can be learned from ancestors. And there may be other reasons as well. One thought that I've had is that people who may have a negative connection with their ancestors have some, there's obviously, or not obviously, but perhaps there is some form of need thwarting taking place. Maybe related, they lacked relatedness with their family in some way, and so or there was autonomy thwarting, and so that then creates a block to be able to feel connected to ancestors. And that, that could happen in the current generation, and we see that with young people who, are suffering needs thwarting. And so one way that they could possibly get around that is to connect with ancestors who aren't thwarting their behavior. But if that only would work if they didn't have further negative feelings beyond just their parents.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I'll open to the panel first. Joseph and John Marshall, are there any questions from you?
I really enjoyed it. I think it's an original piece of work to look at this beyond the typical family that's been studied quite a lot. No, really questioning of the design or the studies, but just curiosity. What is the reason that kind of connecting to your ancestors is beneficial? And I was thinking, it looks like it's like the need for connection is the thing, and belonging is the one thing that you're talking about. But I wonder if there's other things, like terror management suggests that people do these kinds of things as a sense of creating a sense of immortality. Like I'm part of a long line of ancestors that will continue on, forever. So I'm just curious about how you might explore what the function of this behavior is, this connecting to ancestors. Can it be more than belonging? Is there things other than that?
Yeah, I certainly haven't thought about it in terms of what you just expressed, that this idea of immortality. Or that's a really cool idea, and it'll be worth looking at. But I can't speak to that because I've never thought of it. But I certainly will go on to do that beyond here. Well, I think one of the other ways is that as well as that sense of connection in terms of relatedness, I belong, there's also a sense of identifying or not identifying with the values, the roles, or the goals that ancestors have. So an experience that we had, this is now over 20 years ago, taking a group on an extended journey in the Victorian high country, sort of reenacting mountain cattlemen and living in simple clothing and walking from day to day, and other things that help sort of create a sense of living in the past. During that journey, the participants then received a packet that had stories that family historians had put together about their family. And one young man came across a story of a deceased but fairly close relative who had coined a famous Australian marketing jingo that we would all be familiar with, and he really identified with that, and he was like, during exit interviews from the trip, he said that the journey gave him motivation, but that story gave him a focus, and he saw that if his ancestor could create that and be a marketer, that he could do the same. And so he went home and set a goal to undertake a marketing course and set him on a new direction and gave him some new motivation. So in answer to your question, one other way other than just belonging is that we can see, we can identify within ancestors things that we either feel really connected to or not, and then that impacts what we become. We can choose to pursue different goals and values.
So you almost transform the positive qualities they had, that you are like them, so you potentially have those same qualities.
Yeah, but it could work the other way too. You could look and say, as in Teresa's case, she says, hey, I'm not connected to my ancestors. I don't agree with their behavior, but that's still taking a lesson from them, and then changes the way that you become as a person.
So
Thank
it's
you,
like
Joseph.
connection and belonging. Just to summarize, connection and belonging. Also, there's a kind of knowledge of or seeking their wisdom, or
Yes.
or the opposite of whatever wisdom is, seeking, knowing what not to do. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's wisdom, isn't it? To know not what to do is also wisdom. It's just whether you agree or disagree with them.
Yeah.
There's a better
John
word
Marshall?
that I'm looking for, but I can't get it out.
Yeah, I got a bunch of questions. First, Clive, when I read the manuscript, basically it was an upside surprise. I thought it was comprehensive, new construct, references everywhere. I really liked the manuscript, but my role here as an external reviewer, I'm going to be a critic. I think there's some major issues to work through. So let me point out three that I think one of the most important is Teresa's. I don't think it ever occurs to you that ancestors can be dark. I kept thinking of the Disney song, but we don't talk about Bruno while I was reading it. There's shame and guilt and slave owners and all this kind of stuff in our past. And you're only looking at the supportive side, the perceived supportive side. It doesn't occur to you the way parenting style, teaching style, things like that look at the dark side. So I would prefer your construct to be ancestor relationship. Like, I know my history, I know the stories and things like that. And then whether that's supportive or thwartive is another question. First question is it important to your thinking that ancestors can be dark?
Yes, it is very important. And, although it certainly isn't dealt with in the document, as you rightly point out, it's certainly something that I've given a lot of thought to, along with others who are interested in this project and in this idea. And so what we've come to as we've thought about it is a couple of things. First of all, it's probably likely that everybody has at least one dark story, at least one, and probably more. But they also have many good stories. So one of the questions that's asked a lot is, what if you can't find a good story? Well, it's unlikely that you couldn't find a good story, because there's generally a mix of both. But what if you can't find a good story? What if there are, and before I go on to that point, if there are dark stories, it's really important to be able to discern whether you should explore them or not, because stories as you rightly say, that include guilt and shame and those sorts of things. Not everybody's ready to explore those, and particularly if they're close. If they're more distant, maybe it's easier, but particularly if they're recent. And so as part of facilitating any experience where you encourage people to reflect on stories of their ancestors, talking up front about the importance of knowing which stories to explore and which stories to leave alone is very important.
Okay, let me ask one more question. I
Yeah.
gotta watch the time a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm deeply worried that you're confounding need support, need satisfaction, also eudaimonia. It sounds dark. Sorry for being blunt, but ancestors can't support me in autonomy support, competence support, relatedness support sense. The way I would write a questionnaire. I mean, sorry to be blunt, they're dead, so they can't support me. So it's really it's about me and my connection with the past. It's about need satisfaction. I can see that you have belongingness in the title, but I don't see relationship support coming the other way. So I wonder if this study is about support, parenting support, ancestor support, and all that. If I read your questionnaire, it's got I in all the items. I find meaning. I find it important. So it's a personal questionnaire. It's not my ancestors support me, my ancestors encourage me, and things like that. So how about this? Because I see the time. Let me ask you about your questionnaire. I'm not surprised that it predicts eudaimonia because it looks like a eudaimonia questionnaire to me. It's got it means for me. It's important to me. Belonging for me. So isn't this just a questionnaire of eudaimonia?
Good question. I'm not sure that I know the answer to that question off the top of my head. I certainly can't respond to it easily as I can other things, but without going into it further and thinking more carefully about it, my initial response is to say that it may be measuring eudaimonia, but it certainly is measuring ancestor connectedness. I mean, it asks questions about how I feel, how I belong, my sense of belonging to my ancestors, or what they mean to me. So it's certainly, although it may be other things, I certainly think it is also a questionnaire that relates to my sense of connectedness to my ancestors. But having said that, I think what you've asked is a very fair question, and one that obviously I'll need to go away and think about in more detail, because I don't have the means to respond to it properly on the spot.
Okay, I'll ask other questions and go through a dialogue through the written way. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you, John Marshall. Herb, you have a question?
You're on mute.
Yeah, okay. Couple of questions. First of all, study 1 is looking at family connectedness. Study 2 is looking at ancestry connectedness. And I would have thought that discriminant validity was to show that ancestry connectedness contributed to eudaimonia above and beyond family connectedness. I'm sure that ancestry connectedness and family connectedness are related. And so a critical issue is whether the contribution is above and beyond. So I would have thought that would have been a discriminant validity. And I would think that at the very least, be sure to include something about family connectedness in your study 3 to evaluate this. And it may well be that ancestry connectedness enhances family connectedness, which would be a good bonus as well. Okay, that was one big point. The other point is your study 3, your comparison group is so dubious that it undermines the study, and you really should do something to do better. I mean, obviously, people that sign up for an ancestry course are going to be fundamentally different than people who don't. And so you don't have a random control trial, but you don't even have comparable people to begin with. I don't know what strategies. I mean, obviously, one strategy would be to have a waitlist control. I don't know whether that's possible. And I'm not sure whether you can get people that are more similar or not.
You'd like me to respond to that, Herb? Is that right?
Sure.
Yeah. So, well, the only look, the thing that comes to my mind to respond to that is that there'll be a measure of where people are baseline before the activities, both the control group and those that are participating in the activities, and so that's where the comparison is. It'll after those who have participated in the activity, hopefully they'll have some increase in their sense of non-reciprocal family belonging and eudaimonic well-being, and those that didn't will be able to compare the two to see if there is a change or not.
I doubt if your two groups will be comparable at the beginning. I mean, people that choose to do an ancestry course are probably going to have more of a sense of something about their ancestry than people who don't.
Yep, that's probably true. Yep.
And that makes the whole comparison problematic.
I'll discuss that further with Emma.
Yep. The other one about the connection of ancestry connectedness being completely mediated by family connectedness.
Sorry, could you explain that a little bit for me, please?
Okay. If I have a connectedness with my ancestors, it's because I have a connectedness of my family, and the connectedness with ancestors really doesn't contribute to outcomes above and beyond my connection with my family.
You don't think that's the case? That
I don't know whether that's the case or not. I'm saying that's an alternative suggestion to your interpretation.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, there's. So let me see if I understand what you're saying first. You're suggesting that it may not be family connectedness, my sense of being connected to my family, that explains why I feel connected to my ancestors. Is that correct?
I'm saying that the positive outcomes of ancestry connectedness are totally explained by family connectedness.
Yes, but that family connectedness can exist beyond just the immediate family, and there are certainly cases where that I've observed where people who have dysfunctional family connectedness, they don't feel connected to their immediate family, have been able to feel connected to their ancestral family, and that's been beneficial for them.
I'm not saying what I'm saying is true. All I'm saying is that it's a limitation that you need to address. And one way of addressing that, at least in part in study 3, is include both ancestry connectedness and family connectedness.
Right. Okay. Yep.
And a wonderful result is that your intervention improves both.
Yeah, and that actually should be a great outcome, right? If we take the example of an adolescent who's struggling with his parental relationships, he's able to connect with his ancestors and through that resolve his parental relationship, then that's the best outcome all around.
Yes, and that's why I was trying to turn a limitation into a strength.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you for pointing that out. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, everybody. Just given the time, we'll have so thank you again, Clive, and the panel, and everybody for your valuable contributions. And we'll have everybody log off except for the panel and the supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.